Welcome into this segment of Behind the Pen presented by mostvaluablepodcast.com. If you want to listen to the full podcast, go to blogtalkradio.com/mostvaluablepodcast. Also, we're on iTunes, so check us out there as well. Thank you all for listening as always, and enjoy the show.
This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
Welcome in, my friends, to another episode of Behind the Pen. My name is Mike Rankin, and I will be your host. And I am back, baby, from Sioux City, Iowa, where I had the pleasure of covering a national tournament as a credentialed media member. It was pretty sweet. I'm thankful for that experience, but I'm also thankful for Ricky Widmer and Dave Oster for covering for me last week on Behind the Pen. Now, I missed the best week of football. That's Mike Glennon signing for the Chicago Bears. I was away for that, which I was upset about, but that's okay. I have this opportunity now to discuss Bears free agency with you. That's going to be later on in this show. I also had an awesome treat for you. I do have a treat for you today. Drew Edstrom, Bulls blogger of Bulls Confidential, is going to be joining me later on in this show to talk Chicago Bulls basketball. Can't wait for you guys to listen to that. Appreciate him taking the time. It was a lot of fun. We had a lot of conversation about the Chicago Bulls, but before we get into that, and by the way, it's going to be Bears Bulls today on this Behind the Pen. I'm so happy to be back. Again, thanks Ricky and Dave for covering for me last week, and thank all of you for listening. And I don't know where you're listening, whether it's on iTunes, which you could find us, or blogtalkradio.com/mostvaluablepodcast, where we have all of the full-length podcasts. Find it there on Blog Talk Radio. If you're on YouTube, what's up, guys? Drop a like down below. This is going to be a Bulls segment, but our intro has to go over the necessities for you so you know where to find us. We're pretty much everywhere, but thank you guys so much for the support. We are really picking up steam here on Most Valuable Podcast. I'm going to start the show today by talking Chicago Bulls basketball. And, well, at some points of the season, I'm like, wow, this team's a top 4 team in the East, kind of. Right? I mean, they're showing flashes. I mean, they're scoring a ton of points. They look really good on the floor. Jimmy Butler looks like a MVP caliber. Well, okay, maybe I'm going a little too far there, but at least a top 10 talent. And then there are periods where, they're among the bottom 4 teams in the East. They're more dysfunctional than the Knicks front office at points. And now, over their last 10 games, 3-7, they're a game behind the Pistons and 2 other teams, or actually one other team ahead of them. That's the Heat. Here on March 16th, as I record this podcast, they're in the 10th spot right now in the East at a record of 32-36. I mean, going into this season, I guess this is exactly where foreseen them to be, right? Because especially the way they approached the offseason, they were in a good direction until they decided to go after Rajon Rondo. The signing of Rajon Rondo really signified their fate, right? Just straight up, because it didn't make any sense. And we discussed this with Drew later on in the show, and we'll get to that soon. It's a great conversation. I'm excited for you to be able to listen to that. But, man, this Bulls team right now, it sucks because, one, Dwyane Wade, of course, if you haven't heard, he's out for the season. I'm sure you have by now, with a broken elbow, and that's going to suck. Hopefully, if the Bulls do make the playoffs, which they're trying to fight for whatever reason, I don't understand it, but he may be back. It depends how his rehab goes, but that's a serious injury, and when he went down, you knew it was going to be bad. So that's where the Bulls stand right now. They lost one of their best players in Dwyane Wade, and he was so valuable for them on and off the floor, especially on the floor with their young players. So right now it's just a discombobulation of just whatever, because Fred Hoiberg doesn't know what he's doing with this roster. Let's just be flat out honest with you. He's throwing out guys every other night with different starting lineups, different rotational pieces, different guys off the bench. I mean, that's one of the problems, right, with the Chicago Bulls, is the consistency. I mean, that has to be at least on the top of the list. Because you look at Fred Hoiberg's situation, he comes in, under orders of Gar Forman. You talked about it. The GM of the Chicago Bulls after the trade deadline said, hey, we're rebuilding on the fly, retooling, he says. And he continues to use that phrase, and I just want to kick something. But the Bulls are trying to be competitive now for whatever reason instead of just committing to a rebuild. And it's hard. I get it. You're in a major market. You have people to please. People are going, they're the number one destination spot in terms of fans to go and watch a basketball game, whether they know what's going on the floor or not, but the United Center is always full regardless, and it's just a poor product at this point because they don't have really any future. They have a bunch of young pieces who are just blah, just a bunch of average guys out there being mixed together with more average guys, and it just relates to this product, 32-36. Jimmy Butler's a top 10 talent or a fringe top 10 talent, sure. But is that going to get you closer to a championship? Is making the playoffs this year closer to getting you to a championship? If you make it to the 8th seed and get bounced right away, give me a break. So there's a lot of things that we're going to cover here in this conversation with Drew Edstrom from Bulls Confidential. Drew actually came onto the show in recent Behind the Pet episodes, and we must be doing something right if he's back. You can follow him on Twitter at Dwyane Edstrom. He's a lead writer there at Bulls Confidential. If you want to follow him on Twitter, they're at BullsConf. He's also part of the podcast called Sosa's Steam Room. Check them out on iTunes as well as on Twitter. They're at Sosa's Steam Room. Drew, thanks for coming back onto the show, man. It's been a while since we last talked.
Hey, I really appreciate it, and I must get some sort of prize here for coming on a second time, right?
I mean, our budget is kind of limited, but we'll give you a virtual pat on the back or something.
I can deal with that. That's perfectly fine with me.
We'll take that. And you know what? Who I think needs a pat on the back right now is Fred Hoiberg. And we're going to get to him in a minute, but first we got to start with Dwyane Wade. We're talking Chicago Bulls with you right now, and news today out of Chicago is that he's going to be out for the season with a broken elbow. What does that mean for the Bulls moving forward now?
I mean, it means no postseason, to be completely frank with you. Dwyane Wade, it's not his best year numbers-wise, so to speak, but he brings a lot to that locker room, and he brings a lot to Jimmy Butler. I think the biggest contribution that he's made this season, along with timely fourth-quarter scoring, is his ability to kind of mentor Jimmy Butler and take him under his wing and show him how to win, even though the results haven't been there, so to speak. But without Dwyane Wade, you're missing another fourth-quarter scorer down the stretch, a guy who can create his own shot. Not very good defensively, especially out in transition, but someone who's very valuable to this team and adds scoring. And the Bulls need that right now, especially heading down the stretch with no other real contributor besides Jimmy Butler on the offensive end. So it's a big blow for them. They were already wavering in regards to the playoff berth, currently sitting 10th, so not in that 8th spot. They're only a game back, but, they've been so inconsistent all season, and Dwyane Wade has kind of been one of those consistent pieces, even though he's not putting up career averages. Right now, this season, he's averaging 18.6 points per game, which is below his career average, obviously getting up there in age. He's 35 right now, so the years are catching up to him, and that's sad to think about, especially looking back at his great historic career, probably the third best shooting guard of all time. But it takes a lot away from this current Bulls team.
I want to bounce something off you because you mentioned it flat out when you answered the question: is that playoffs are done? I mean, this is most likely the case, and that was my reaction too. As soon as I saw Dwyane Wade out for the regular season, it's like, well, what are you going to do now? But according to Fred Hoiberg, that's not in the plans. He's still going to coach, and he still believes the Bulls are going to play with an effort to make the playoffs. What's the thinking there? I
mean, he has to say that. One, to keep season ticket holders interested, and to keep management off his back, so to speak. Gar Forman and John Paxson for a long time have been talking about how they kind of want to retool on the fly here and keep this team competitive. I don't really see how that's working, even with those inside of the organization supposedly saying that it is. I don't see it. Fred Hoiberg, Gar Forman went on the radio recently and talked about how Fred Hoiberg's job is safe. I don't really understand that thinking. Fred Hoiberg does not have a lot of tools to work with here. So, of course, he's going to try to win. Every single coach wants to win and put the most competitive product out on the floor and watch them succeed. But right now, I don't think it's realistic. The thinking is, if I'm Fred Hoiberg right now, Jimmy Butler is my only guy. I'm going to start Rajon Rondo. I'm going to find someone to plug into Wade's spot, and I'm basically going to ride Jimmy Butler to the end here. So there's not much thinking. I mean, he has to answer that question the right way, and he has to say that they're going to try to win.
Right, and I kind of want to stay with the Hoiberg conversation because it's an interesting one. And going back to last season when he was hired, obviously handpicked head coach and didn't really get into a system that kind of fit what he wanted to run on the floor. He had to deal with personalities like Derrick Rose, Jimmy Butler not getting along. Obviously, he was on the wrong side of Joakim Noah. And all of that kind of played into a mediocre season where they missed the playoffs in a chance where they thought they were championship contenders. Fast forward now to this season, right? And Fred Hoiberg is going into the year thinking, okay, well, now, a year under my belt, I'm going to get this transition going. I have players that fit my style. And then the front office gives them Rajon Rondo and Dwyane Wade. And then all of a sudden, this is what we have. Now, I have to ask you this flat out. Is Fred Hoiberg a good NBA coach, or is he a victim of circumstance with the Chicago Bulls?
He's a very average NBA coach, and here's why. The front office didn't do him any favors, giving him Wade and Rondo, of course, giving him no shooters. And the way the NBA is headed right now, it all revolves around shooting. It all revolves around young pieces who can get out and run and shoot the ball. And he doesn't have that right now at all. His system, I don't think directly translates to the NBA, but he doesn't have any toys to play with. He doesn't have guys that'll fit his system in college. It's a very college-based style offense. So I think Hoiberg is an average NBA head coach, and I think all the things that Gar Forman and John Paxson were saying about Fred Hoiberg coming in, they're saying that the way he relates to players is a strength. He's an offensive savant. He does a couple things well. Honestly, I don't really see one thing that he does do well. It's all very average. It's all very mediocre. They talked about him relating to players and, really relating with these guys. He's a college coach. He gets along with college guys. So far, his communication has been very poor. No accountability at all in the locker room. You have guys like Michael Carter-Williams and like some other players on the Bulls saying they don't know why they've gotten benched at all, which can't happen, especially with young players. They want to get better. They want to grow. They want to know what they need to do in order to be successful. And so far, Fred Hoiberg hasn't even reiterated that to them at all.
And you talked about it too, Drew, and I apologize for cutting you off there, but it reminds me of Tom Thibodeau, right, where he had really nothing but turned it into something. And we're not saying, obviously, we're not trying to compare the two in terms of coaching value, but Fred Hoiberg hasn't turned what he's got into anything, really.
And here's why. There's no consistency. Athletes are a creature of habit. You know what I'm saying? It's like they need a certain rhythm to get going. They need to know that they're trusted. All these athletes, whatever sport it is, they constantly think they're being screwed over in some way. So they need to have some sort of stability. And Fred Hoiberg has provided no stability with the rotation whatsoever. Different point guards coming in and out, different front court players coming in and out. Nikola Mirotic wasn't playing for a couple games. A guy who is a restricted free agent who you're looking to see if he can prove something to you. A lot of these guys are getting screwed over. A lot of these guys are saying, all right, what am I doing wrong here, and what do I need to do to get stable minutes? Mm-hmm. There's been no stability whatsoever. And, that if you provide stability to young players, they tend to perform. They tend to step up in some matter, and you know what you're going to get. But with this team, there's no stability. The rotation changes every other day. It's like Fred Hoiberg's kind of looking at a piece of paper and randomly pointing. He's like, all right, Paul Zipser's going to play today, or Laverne's going to play, or, Michael Carter-Williams might play, but Jerian Grant all of a sudden is not playing at all, and he's arguably your best point guard in the roster, in my opinion.
Now, the first player that kind of stood out to me in terms of stability, and I know he's not a younger guy, and you mentioned a lot of names there, but Rajon Rondo. I mean, you brought him in expecting to be a part of the big three, and I say that with air quotes, but he starts on the bench now, and then all of a sudden he gets back into the starting lineup. You talk about consistency. That just doesn't make any sense. What's going on with the whole Rajon Rondo experiment this year?
I mean, the thing with Rajon, I got to give him credit. He has been very cooperative ever since his incident with throwing the towel at the assistant coach. He's performed the past couple of days. He's playing with pace. I thought he was really good with that second unit, with those younger guys looking for open shooters. But you cannot have a point guard in today's NBA who cannot shoot the ball, and Rajon Rondo just cannot do that flat out. I understand why he's starting now. I mean, they're contending for a playoff spot. You need to look competitive. I think he's a bench guy now for the rest of his career. I'm not even sure what kind of money an NBA team will offer him if he were to get cut by the Bulls in the offseason. But the Rajon Rondo, the whole signing was a mistake.
Let's go back to the trade deadline now, because the Bulls had to do something. They couldn't be in the same situation they were last year with the Pau Gasol thing where he just walks for nothing. So they traded Taj Gibson and Doug McDermott for Cameron Payne, Joffrey Laverne, and Anthony Morrow. How would you grade the move now that we are just about a month in?
D. Solid D.
Yikes.
It was not a good move. You see Serge Ibaka getting traded to the Raptors, and the Magic being able to get a first-round pick in return. Taj Gibson is worth a first-round pick of some sort. By no means, this trade is an absolute joke in my mind, giving up 2 established rotation players for 3 guys. Oh, and a pick. You're giving up a pick as well, which is just ludicrous in my mind, for 3 guys who, Anthony Morrow, used to be able to shoot, not anymore. Cameron Payne, young 22-year-old guard, wiry frame, very careless with the ball, very inconsistent shooter. Like, you're giving up proven pieces. Doug McDermott maybe isn't so proven, but Taj Gibson is a guy that was very valued throughout the organization, respected, great guy in the locker room, performed each and every night. You're giving him up for peanuts, so to speak. So I was not very happy with the move. The fact that they had to give up a pick was the most shocking thing for me. You could even do straight up, in my mind, McDermott for Cameron Payne straight up, one for one.
I'm with you. I was actually dumbfounded to see that a pick was actually involved and the Bulls weren't receiving one. But I have to ask you, because obviously this trade is kind of centered around Cameron Payne, a young point guard who the Bulls, I almost said Bears there, yikes. Well, the Bulls need someone in the backcourt to kind of lead them there. Is there value in Payne?
I mean, he's a young guy. I mean, he has a lot of room to grow. He'll be under contract for the next couple of years, but he's been dealing with injury. He's injury prone with that foot on and off. He's injured right now, actually. He's got a sore right foot. And, if nothing is jumping out the page with me in regards to Payne, he has potential for sure. Former first-round pick from the Thunder, kind of caught behind Russell Westbrook for quite some time, and now he's on the Bulls, and he has that chance to prove himself. He's knocked down. He can knock down shots, but I don't really see him as a creator. Was decent in the pick and roll with OKC, but my thoughts on him aren't necessarily high right now. I could get proven wrong down the road. I don't really know what to make of him. He's very lengthy, careless with the basketball. Doesn't look like a creator to me. His form is kind of weird on his shot.
Right.
He has some room to grow. Just the trade made it that much harder to swallow that this is the guy that the Bulls were looking at to kind of like take as a piece. You could have gotten so much more for Taj Gibson or even Doug McDermott. Reminder, the amount of picks that the Bulls had to give up just to get Doug McDermott to begin with, and then you're adding on basically another pick to package with him. So many options that the Bulls gave up just for Doug McDermott, but now that's turned into Cameron Payne.
This
ridiculous.
Is Drew Edstrom speaking out behind the pen from Bulls Confidential. We really appreciate you taking the time to discuss Bulls basketball with us. I got to throw this in there. This relates to the draft, and the Bulls haven't done quite well in the draft as of late. You see Tony Snell on another team. You see Doug McDermott on another team. Bobby Portis now. You don't know really what you have, but he's getting a chance. He's starting to get some minutes now that the floor's opened up. Now, Denzel Valentine. How would you grade those two players and at this point of their careers? Is there any value there? Bobby
Portis and Denzel?
Yes.
I'll start with Portis. Is an offensive threat. Cannot jump whatsoever. Probably has a 2-inch vertical if you were to measure it out. Not an overly athletic big. I'm glad they're playing him at the 4 position. At times they played him at the 5 in the past, and that's just not his position whatsoever. Could definitely stretch the floor, knock down some shots, but defensively he's extremely lost. Very bad on pick and roll. Is not strong enough to stay with those bigger guys or even quick enough on his feet to stay with those stretch 4s and contest shots. Bobby's all right if he could figure it out defensively. Offensively, he's still a little inconsistent, but he's still kind of getting his reins, so to speak. I'm not entirely low on Bobby Portis. I don't think he's the best. I grade that acquisition as a C right now, a solid C. With Denzel, he can create. He can definitely create. He has solid handle, and he's been recently a knockdown shooter for the Bulls, which has been very good, and the Bulls definitely need that. And I think he can find his place with the Bulls as a knockdown 3-point shooter. I don't see him starting anytime soon. maybe for Wade, but I doubt it. I maybe see Paul Zipser probably getting back inserted into the lineup. Denzel, there's still a lot left to prove for me defensively. He's not the best, doesn't have quick feet, not overly athletic. And the Bulls have a knack for kind of drafting these 4-year college guys, which really kind of puts them in a hole. You're looking at their very young 1-year college guys that are coming out, and they're just overly athletic and very talented. And the Bulls really like kind of the 4-year college-made model, which has really backfired recently.
We're talking draft now, and the last time I had you on, Drew, we did focus on the draft, and fast forward to about a year later, the Bulls are pretty much in the same spot. I'm going to ask you this question now. I don't know how much research you've done on it, but is there any names you're looking at the Bulls may target, maybe like a Jared Allen, Justin Patton, Luke Kennard even?
Well, here's the thing with the draft. When we fast forward here to the end of this season, into the summer, I 100% believe that Jimmy Butler will be on the table once again. Whether or not the Celtics or another team want to offer up something for his services remains to be seen. But the draft could go any which way, just because the Bulls are in such this limbo, not sure what to do with Jimmy Butler. They've said that they're going to build with Jimmy Butler, not around him, which I think is ridiculous. Jimmy Butler is a top 15 player in this league. You build around him. You give him the tools to succeed and really flourish in the league, and they haven't really done that so far. So to be completely honest with you, in regards to the draft, it depends on where the Bulls are picking. Obviously, you have those top-tier guys, the Balls, the Fultz of the world, a bunch of those 1-year in college type of talents that can really make a difference. But it really depends on where the Bulls are drafting, and right now they're kind of stuck in the middle. You look at Patton, you look at De'Aaron Fox at maybe like a 10 to 12 spot. TJ Leaf is an interesting prospect for me. I would just take best player available because there's so many holes. It's kind of like the Bears.
Right.
There's just so many different holes, and you don't know what the roster is going to look like come the draft.
I think that's a good answer, too, and I'm glad you mentioned the Jimmy Butler thing because last year he was on the table, at least reportedly, and I'm not going to question the Woj, you know what I'm saying? So
yep.
I feel like, Jimmy, this is the right time if the Bulls do want to kind of go in to a rebuild. This is the time to trade Jimmy. Drew, thank you so much for jumping on. I got one more question for you, and then I'll let you go. Who's in your Final Four in the March Madness pool, and who you got taking the championship?
Well, and this is the best month of basketball, in my opinion. I absolutely love it. Teams kind of heading towards the playoff run in the NBA, and then March Madness, of course. I got to give a shout-out to the Northwestern Wildcats.
They won today.
Got a W, representing Chicago well.
Absolutely.
Really, really appreciate that. I love Chris Collins and the whole Collins family. Just great storyline. But to answer your question, for me, I got the Duke Blue Devils. I got Arizona. I also have the UCLA Bruins. I hope LeVar Ball doesn't suit up for them anytime soon, even though he can take Michael Jordan one-on-one.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a storyline in itself. It's just ridiculous to me, the amount of hype that
that whole family is all over the place now. I mean, he's just plastered all over my screen. I'm sick of it.
It's really way too much, and I wonder if that will hurt his draft stock. But yeah, I got Duke, Arizona, UCLA, and then the Kansas Jayhawks.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. What's your Final Four?
So I got Arizona, Villanova, and I had UCLA getting knocked out. So that's one of those things. I have Kansas in the Final Four as well. So my championship, UNC and Villanova for a rematch. UNC taking it.
Yeah, I got the Dukies winning the whole thing. I don't know why. I don't really like Duke whatsoever.
No, they're talented.
They are talented, and they're coming in hot off an ACC title. So it just felt right. You know, when you're filling out your bracket, you could go numbers, you could go feel. I want a little bit of both.
Drew, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for jumping on Behind the Pen. Hopefully we can do it again soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys for sticking around for this segment of Behind the Pen. If you want more Most Valuable Podcast content, click on the video up above, because I don't know why you wouldn't want to keep listening to our voices every day. But again, guys, thank you all for listening. We really do appreciate you.